What's up guys, Pinkward here. I'm going to be going over the Shaco changes that came out on the PBE in the previous weeks. Most of my opinions will only be applicable towards AP Shaco in the top lane, so let's get started. First off, Shaco's passive Backstab. Shaco's current passive reads, Shaco deals 20% bonus damage when attacking from behind. This applies a 20% damage buff to both Shaco's autos and 2 Shiv Poison when attacking from behind. Shaco's new passive will read, Shaco's basic attacks critically strike for 120% damage when striking a unit from behind. It is on a 3-second cooldown modified by CDR. The new passive will scale from 120% at level 1 to 145% at level 18. This is 2% per level till level 9 and then 1% per level till level 18. Since I'm not getting much, if any, attack damage, there's no real bonuses that AP Shaco gets from this passive. When taking into account that Shaco's 2 Shiv has its entire damage, both base damage and 100% AP ratio, modified by 20%, the current passive would be receiving a nerf in terms of AP Shaco. This is until you get to Shaco's new Q, Deceive. Shaco's current Q reads, Shaco teleports nearby and becomes invisible for 3.5 seconds. His next basic attack within the next 6 seconds will critically strike, dealing 140% damage, scaling up. His new Deceive reads, Shaco teleports nearby and becomes invisible for 1.5 seconds. Shaco remains invisible even if he uses Jack-in-the-Box or Hallucinate. His next basic attack during or shortly after invisibility will deal 20 plus 100% current AD plus 50% current AP as physical damage and reduces the cooldown by 2.5 seconds. These numbers you see are increased by the Backstab modifier when attacking your enemy from behind. This is where AP Shaco gets a buff. The only downside to this skill is that it deals physical damage and will be reduced by armor. But this also can be an upside, as your laning opponent will have to decide if they want to build armor or magic resist against you. If they build magic resist against you, you have a high chance of initiating with the fear from your box while invisible, and then look to all-in them with the physical damage from your new Deceive and autos. But if they build armor, you are able to hard poke them down with the high magic damage output from boxes. Shiv and Hextech Revolver are Protobelt if you purchase them. Now outside of the damage part of Shaco's Q, there's a utility of it. In the early game, the length of Shaco's Deceive is nerfed from 3.5 seconds down to 1.5 seconds. This does scale per level all the way up to 4.5 seconds, making it a 1 second greater length when fully maxed out. As the utility of Shaco's new Q is increased in later levels, I will most likely start to level it up first instead of 2 Shiv Poison. The one big criticism I have for the change to Deceive is that Riot took a lot of Shaco's power from his Shiv and put it on his getaway ability, but I will be talking more about his Q later in the video. Next, let's talk about Jack-in-the-Box. Shaco's current box reads, Shaco creates a Jack-in-the-Box at a target location. It will become invisible after 2 seconds and pop out when an enemy comes near, fearing nearby enemies for 0.5 seconds and attacking them. This is not changed between the old and new box. What is changed is that the new Jack-in-the-Box is a new 5% AP ratio that increases the duration on the box. Easier way to say this is that for every 100 AP, the box will last 5 seconds longer. This is a pretty big buff, as you see here with 500 AP and 40% CDR, I laid down 9 boxes. That's a lot of CC, but as you can also see, there was a nerf. Boxes can no longer be stacked on top of each other. I can understand why Riot did this though, as if I were to walk into a bush to get one shot by a stack of 8 boxes, I'd be pretty angry. Now I'd like to add that there was an item added into the game that kinda makes me mad. The Control Ward. Places a ward that reveals the surrounding area. This device will disable and reveal nearby wards and hidden traps. You can carry 3 of them in your inventory and they only cost 50 gold each. This item is going to force you to adapt. It's very similar to Red Trinket but lasts forever. You will need to figure out how to take it down during laning phase. One thing Riot did do is that they fixed Shaco's clone to now be able to attack wards. This is pretty great, and your counterplay will be using the clone to take back the area for you. As soon as you get the ward down, your boxes will reactivate and you will be able to start fighting again. If the enemy is contesting you to keep their ward alive, they'll be in the middle of all your boxes when you and your clone take the ward out, pretty much guaranteeing you a win in the fight and usually a kill. Now, in mention of the clone, there have been a few buffs to make it worth leveling up at ranks 11 and 16. The first part of Hallucinate was not changed at all though. Shaco vanishes briefly and appears with a clone that lasts up to 18 seconds. The clone deals 75% of Shaco's damage and receives 50 increased damage, on death detonating to deal a high damage in an AoE around it. What was added to Shaco's ultimate was pretty much a sign of recognition from Riot to my Illuminati box placement. When Shaco's clone dies, it spawns 3 mini Jack-in-the-Boxes in a triangle pattern. These boxes do 25 damage and fear enemies for 0.75 seconds. The reason I would level up the ultimate now is because the mini boxes that spawn from the clone increase per rank up to 75 damage and the fear duration scales up to 1.25 seconds. There is one downside to these boxes though. I don't know how effective they are going to be in teamfights. They have a relatively low HP pool, and if one dies, they all die. Not to mention their fade time allows for your opponent to get away before they activate. And to add to this, they only last 5 seconds before disappearing. I will have to give a more in-depth tutorial in a few months, once I have more practice with this new clone. Shaco's rework numbers seem fairly good on paper, but I will have to get some more games on the new Shaco before I know how good it actually is. My thoughts on the rework are somewhat of a disappointment though. My playstyle of Shaco has always been more of a hit and run of sorts. Riot now has taken most of the damage off of Shaco's Shiv and put it onto his Deceive, which I and many other Shaco mains usually use as their getaway ability. This takes a lot of power out of Shaco's laning phase. As shown in the current clip, if I use my Q as a damage source, there's a high possibility of an enemy teammate hiding in the shadows, waiting for me to blow it. This leaves me vulnerable without a way to survive and makes me die to the gank. Another thing that was changed is that double boxes no longer cancel enemy jumps. How Shaco's boxes could previously stop a Lee Sin Q, an Irelia Q, or even a Jarvan and Malphite ultimate, they can no longer do that, putting you at even more risk if you try to bait using your boxes at low HP. Yet this is also advantageous, as now the enemy will initiate into the triangle of boxes and be in the middle of them all. Now moving on, I mentioned earlier about Shaco's Q in the early game, how you can take advantage of your opponent depending on what resist they are building. In all honesty though, it's pretty bad in the early game. The length of the stealth is down by 2 seconds unless you're leveling it up, and it's on somewhat of a longer cooldown unless you get the auto off. This makes Shaco really punishable. But outside of lane, when it's leveled up, it's pretty strong when using versus squishies. It now has an additional second added to its length by max rank. This will be the extra time needed to get behind the opponent to take advantage of the Q backstab damage. This will force them to either run or flash away, where you can either prolo belt or shiv them for the execution kill. But as always, you are an assassin. You want to focus on the squishy low resist targets to kill. For AP Shaco, after the rework, tankier people will take little to no damage from your Q backstab, as it deals physical damage instead of magic damage. You'll be building more magic penetration and won't really have any armor penetration to get through their heavy armor. Now with this all being said, I will need to play more of the rework Shaco to get a feel of it. If I'm enjoying it, making it work, I will put out a tutorial video in the next few months to explain more in depth of my playstyle as AP. Till then, I'd appreciate if you guys would comment on the video asking me more specific questions on the abilities and on my personal thoughts on it, and I'll make sure to answer as many as possible. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a good one.